Over 2 million Muslims will descend on the holy city of Mecca in Saudi Arabia this weekend. It's expected to be the biggest Hajj pilgrimage in years. The Hajj is among the 5 pillars of Islam and must be undertaken by all Muslims who can afford to at least once in their lifetime. The main rituals begin tomorrow. Now, journalist and well-known anti-crime activist Yusuf Abramjee, is no stranger to you and I here on ENCA, is in Mecca, and we're crossing to him right now. Yusuf, thank you for the time to chat to us on this very important pilgrimage for you indeed. Tell us a bit about the group that you're traveling with and what you've experienced up until now.
Hello, Master. I'm speaking to you from the bus where we just visited the factory, that is the cloth factory, where the cover of the Holy Kaaba, that is here in the holiest city of Mecca, is being produced. And we're now making our way back to the city of Mecca. This is my second Hajj. I came here in 2016 as part of my first Hajj, and I was now invited as part of a delegation from 90 countries as the guest of the custodian of the 2 holy mosques. The King's program is being hosted by the Ministry of Islamic Affairs, and it's great being back on Hajj. As you correctly mentioned, it is compulsory for any Muslim who can afford it to go on Hajj at least once in your lifetime. And post-COVID, they're expecting some 2 million plus pilgrims. In fact, this city is already packed to capacity. There are tens of thousands of people all now preparing themselves for the most important part of the Hajj. It's the 5 days that starts on Monday morning. On Tuesday is the day of Arafat, the most important day of the Hajj. And then on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, a number of other rituals get performed, including the stoning, the symbolic stoning of the devil at the Jamarat, which in previous years was the scene of a number of disasters, including stampedes. The tent town of Mina has been set up on the outskirts with thousands of people getting ready to stay there for at least 4 or 5 days.
Now, Yusuf, they're expecting this to be the biggest Hajj pilgrimage in years. I'm assuming the fact that it's also taking place after the years of the pandemic that we found itself in will make this year's Hajj even more special.
Most certainly, the Hajj is one of the biggest gatherings in the world. In fact, if one looks at the crowds and the various measures that have been put in place, I must admit, one would never imagine that we had COVID at least 2 or 3 years ago. And it all seems to have returned back to normal. South Africans, the numbers were cut dramatically over the past few years. In fact, the quota was 2,500 this year, but the total numbers, people that were accredited, went up to 3,500. And it seems to me a lot of normality has returned. I mean, if one looks at the preparations for the Hajj, and I think the kingdom must be congratulated for, again, putting all the mechanisms in place, everything from crowd control to security. There are thousands and thousands of police officials, volunteers, the army, the defense force, and really the logistics, one can imagine, is a nightmare. But it seems to me that all systems go, and a lot of the facilities have been modernized, especially where the disasters took place in previous years that claimed a number of lives, Marcel.
I'm just looking at pictures of tourists, well, the Hajj pilgrims arriving in buses in their numbers. And they're talking about, you spoke about the numbers there. It can be quite an overwhelming experience if you just look at the length and breadth of what happens over those few days. But at its core, it's a very personal experience, isn't it?
Indeed, it's called a journey of a lifetime. The pilgrims, the over 2 million, are from 160 countries. So you can imagine how big the crowds are. Yesterday at the Haram, which is the holiest site where the Kaaba is, and that is where Muslims go around the Kaaba 7 times for the Umrah. And after that, we then shave our hair for the males. There were hundreds of thousands of people yesterday. And indeed, you have to be calm, you have to be patient. There's no need to rush. And one just really has to go with the flow. And all the pilgrims are now preparing themselves for the most important part, as I mentioned. It starts on Monday. But in this scorching heat of about 45 degrees, as I speak to you, Marcel, it's about 45 degrees. And on the day of Hajj, they're expecting the temperatures to go up to about 50 degrees. One can imagine the number of medical facilities and measures that are put in place, because a lot of pilgrims collapse because of dehydration, heat issues, and so on. But it seems to me that the authorities are really geared up to handle all the logistics of this year's Hajj.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. Journalist and anti-crime activist Yusuf Abramjee reporting to us live there from a bus. He finds himself in Mecca in Saudi Arabia, of course, for a very important week in the Muslim holy calendar.